Coming up next on Insights on PBS Hawaii, Election 2014, House District 36 and Senate District 23. Aloha and welcome to Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Malia Mattoch, your host for tonight's show. In 2011, redistricting changed state house boundaries in central Oahu, helping political newcomer Republican Beth Fukumoto Chang beat veteran Democratic Mililani and Waipio Representative Marilyn Lee. Now, nearing the end of her first term, incumbent Chang is tasked with fending off Lee, who has been campaigning to regain elected office in House District 36, Mililani and Mattoch. After the discussion with Chang and Lee, we'll move to the Windward Coast and North Shore, Senate District 23, where State Senator Clayton Hee vacated his seat for an unsuccessful bid for lieutenant governor. First-term Republican Representative Richard Fale is vying with former state representative Gil Riviere, a one-time Republican who is now running as a Democrat. We invite you to join our conversation by calling, emailing, or tweeting your questions and comments. Tonight, the seating arrangement and order of the questions were determined by random draw. Now to our candidates. Marilyn Lee, a Democrat, represented the Mililani and Waipio areas in the State House for 16 years, serving as Majority Whip and Majority Floor Leader during her tenure. As a lawmaker, her committee assignments included Vice Chairwoman of the House Finance Committee. Incumbent Beth Fukumoto Chang, a Republican and the Minority Floor Leader, is completing her first term as the state representative for Mililani and Mattoch's District 36. She previously served as the Director of Research for the House Minority. Welcome to you both. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you very much.
Marilyn, if I could start with you. Conservative religious organizations campaigned against you in 2012. Do you anticipate that being a problem in this round of elections for you?
Well, you know, I've been walking my district for a long time, since January, because I did have a primary, and I found that I've had very few questions about marriage equality or about other social issues. So, you know, marriage equality is now the law, and I think that hopefully we'll think about reconciliation at this point in time.
Beth, any thoughts on that? Do you think Mililani as an area has become more conservative over the years?
You know, I would agree with Marilyn on this. I don't think it's something that it's not a top of mind issue. One of my favorite things to ask children when they come to visit the legislature is, what is most important to your parents? What do they complain about the most? And it's always things like bills, taxes, traffic. Rarely do they raise social issues. So I would agree, when you go door to door, that's not something people have at top of mind.
All right, let's talk traffic, because that is a huge issue for your area. In terms of some sort of alleviation, do you see any ways of trying to bring some relief for Mililani?
Well, I think the Department of Transportation is already working on some of that. They're expanding the roads. What I would like to see is more coordination between the city and the state when it comes to transportation projects. We're having a lot of road work right now, and one of the problems for all of us, including myself, is that it takes a really long time to even get across Mililani right now. And I think we need to maybe work on that to improve traffic, but I am glad that we're fixing the roads and expanding things to try to make things better.
Marilyn, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's been such an improvement, just the small amount of repaving that's been done, that I think people are just so happy that finally something's being done. But I think we can also look forward to transit coming and some kind of relief. It's going to be a while, but you know, certainly Mililani will benefit from that. I think, again, we need to look at carpooling and some sort of ride sharing. I'd like to see us go back to the van pool that we had several years ago, although there are several private ones running. But I think there are a lot of ways that we can make traffic better.
Do you think developments like Koa Ridge will negatively impact traffic for your area?
Well, there's no question that more people is going to mean more cars, but I know the neighborhood boards have been, working on some kinds of solutions, and, we have to look at more buses in the area, and also, as I said, more carpooling. So we need housing, and downstream is where the housing is going to go for now, so we're going to have to live with it, and we're going to have to work to improve it.
So you feel Koa Ridge is a positive development for your community?
I think we need housing. And I think many people are concerned about additional development downstream. And personally, you know, I would like to see us direct development to the urban core. But Koa Ridge has already been approved, and so we're going to have to live with that and see how we can improve the situation.
Beth, your thoughts?
Again, I would have to agree. I think it's already done. It's something that's going to happen. It's a project that has been reduced significantly, so it's not going to be the same burden that people remember hearing about initially. And there will be some traffic solutions that come in with Koa Ridge. But I would like to see more development around, especially the rail stops, transient-oriented development, because I think that's really where the growth should be.
Let's take our first question from Darren and Hilo. How can Hawaii be business-friendly when government is so large? Beth, let's start with you.
You know, there's a lot of ways. I think one of the things that really needs to be worked on is reducing regulation. A lot of businesses have a lot of trouble because it's so hard to navigate what is a very complicated system that we have right now. Additionally, being able to lower the taxes on businesses, or at least keeping them stable. We tend to change things a lot. We change the tax credits, the tax structure, and it's hard for businesses to keep up. We hear a lot from people that they just want things, just tell us what it is and we'll do it, but they don't like it when the legislature continues to change things.
Do you agree, Marilyn?
Well, I would agree partially, and I'd also say that if we're talking about new businesses coming into the community, the cost of housing is one thing that is a big deterrent to new businesses coming in and to bringing, you know, new staff to those businesses. So, you know, we have to do something about affordability of housing.
Marilyn, could you take the first question from Brian via email? I have a question for both Representative Beth Fukumoto and Marilyn Lee. Please describe your top 3 legislative accomplishments.
Okay, well, I was in the legislature for a long time, so I guess in terms of what I brought back to the community, I would say the many CIP projects, including the new field at Mililani High School, the new building at Mililani High School, a new library, parking lot. But in terms of bills that I passed, I'm very interested in victim issues, and one of the bills I was able to pass was to put into statute the Save-In program, which is a program that allows the victims of crime to be able to access when their perpetrator is released from prison. So that's a very important one. And secondly, I think in terms of bills, I did a lot of work with the nurse practitioners and helping advanced practice registered nurses really be able to practice their craft as they should be. And that was one of the most important bills too. So I think that's more than 3 things.
Beth?
Well, I think the first thing that is top of mind for me is that I was able to be a part of what was a historic coalition this year in the House between Republicans and Democrats. It was the first time that we had a Republican vice chair of finance. And I think that that moved us significantly towards what the people of Hawaii actually want, which is a functional government that works across the aisle with each other. And a lot of good came from that. One bill that I championed and got a lot of support from a variety of different organizations, conservative and liberal organizations, was a bill to reduce taxes for lower income people. And this bill made it all the way to conference, which was a huge deal for me because from the beginning people said there's no way this is going to pass. It reduces taxes too much. It's never been able to make it that far in the past, and it did make it all the way to conference. So that was a big accomplishment to me. And also in terms of CIPs, we brought home $100 million, over $100 million to our district this year. And I'm very excited about that.
Well, perhaps I should follow this question by asking, what would be your first piece of legislation that you would like to propose if elected, re-elected?
You know, this year I would really like to see us address election reform. I think we're seeing it's one of the hottest topics right now. This is actually the second time Colleen Hanabusa has lost by 0.7%. She lost by 800 votes to Mazie Hirono in 2006. And that's just, you know, one elected official in one race. But if it can always be that close and we don't have any recount, we don't have any sort of mechanism to automatically make sure that we can make sure that people are confident that their votes really do count. And so I would like to see an automatic recount. I would like to see us tighten up some of our other election laws, like how to contest elections. I think it's unconscionable that we say that people have to be able to prove fraud before they can even file a contest.
I was surprised when I recently learned we're one of only 2 states that doesn't have automatic recounts.
Yes.
And Marilyn, what about yourself? What would you like to concentrate on if elected?
Excuse me. There, you know, for many years, for a long time, I have been very involved in caregiver issues. And in fact, I am the president of a caregiver support group in Mililani, which meets at Wahiawa Hospital. And I know just from talking to people in my neighborhood and listening to the wonderful people that come to those groups, caregivers all, that we need to do something about the problem of long-term care and caregiver support. So I have tried various bills have been introduced in the past, but I think the time is now coming where the public is starting to realize that this is a big problem. So that will be one of my top priorities, is caregiver support and some sort of solution to the long-term care problem.
Beth, we alluded earlier to the controversy surrounding same-sex marriage. This is a question for you. How can you justify your discrimination and deny equal rights to our gay family members, neighbors, and friends? So for some, it appears to still be an issue. How would you explain your vote against same-sex marriage?
I completely understand that this was a very difficult issue for a lot of people, and emotions ran high on either side. It was the most difficult decision that I feel like I had to make as a legislator. But at the end of the day, our title is representative, which means that we have to be representative of the districts that we represent. Our own opinion shouldn't factor into that. And you know, I had more testimony from people in my district on this issue than any other issue, probably combined in the entire time I was elected. We had 1,000 people write in and ask me to vote no, and 200 people asked me to vote yes. And at the end of the day, to me, that's what democracy is, and I am their representative, and I have to go with that, regardless of anything else I might think, because we do run into trouble if any one person, any one elected official believes that their opinion is better than the people that they represent, because that's no longer a democracy.
Marilyn, let me ask you, had you been in office at that point and you had had a representation such as Beth is outlining, how would you have voted?
I would have voted in favor of marriage equality.
And can you explain why?
Because I think it was the right thing to do. And as we see, 19 states have already approved marriage equality, and the courts are speaking out very loudly on this issue.
All right, let's turn to taxes. A question from Catherine in Mililani. Would you support or reject extending the 0.05% excise tax beyond 2012 date? Beth, could you take that?
Sure. You know, I think people have spoken loudly on rail. We've had a couple mayoral elections to talk about whether or not we wanted to change directions. We've decided not to as a community. We seem to want to move forward with this plan. I personally have been back and forth on rail. I voted for it initially and then pulled back when I saw it wasn't a plan that I really liked. But this is the plan we're moving forward with. The train has left the station, so to speak, and that means we're going to have to find a way to fund it. I don't know if extending the GET is the right way to go, but we are going to have to think of a solution, and I look forward to that debate this year in the legislature.
So if it were necessary to fund rail by extending the GET tax beyond the sunset date, you might be open to it if needed?
Yeah, I think we need to talk about it.
Marilyn? I agree. I'm a longtime supporter of rail, and I feel that we're at a point where we can't go back, and I believe that rail will help solve our traffic solution, and we need to move into the future, and rail is the future.
What makes you the better qualified candidate, Marilyn?
Well, there are probably several reasons, and although I do respect Ms. Fukumoto Chang, and we're certainly on speaking terms,
yes.
I have 16 years of legislative experience, and I also have a long experience working in the community of Mililani. I've been a neighborhood board chair, I've been a PTSA president, I've served on SCBMs, I've served on SCCs, I've run the caregiver support group. I worked in the community at Wahiawa General Hospital for over 25 years, so I not only know the people in groups in the community, but I also know many patients and families in the community. So I feel like my knowledge as a registered nurse and my experience in the legislature really qualify me to be a legislator again.
Beth?
Marilyn's been doing this since as long as I've been alive. She has obviously more experience in a lot of different areas, but I think you know, this year we brought a lot of change into the House. We changed the way we did things in terms of committee assignments. We passed more bills that were co-sponsored by Republicans and Democrats. We established the Hawaii Future Caucus, which is a bipartisan caucus that will help to move forward legislation where there's common ground. And I think that there is room. Experience is important, and I've had 2 years of experience now. I was able to hit the ground running. I think I've proven that. But it's also important to bring new ideas to the table, and it's important to be promoting change because that's the future.
We spoke earlier about the Koa Ridge development, and as you both mentioned, it has been approved. Would you limit development outside of that sort of central rail route in the Mililani area if future? I mean, if you had a voice or an opinion, do you think there needs to be an end to development in the Mililani area at a certain point, or do you think that the need for housing is so immense that really any development needs to be seriously considered? Beth?
You know, I think we shouldn't categorically rule out anything ever, really. I think that's a bad just policy. But I do think that we should be developing along the rail route. It just makes sense. If we're going to be investing in this, if we're going to be talking about potentially increasing taxes, then let's commit. And that means we need to build around that route.
Marilyn?
Oh, I would agree, you know, transit-oriented development is really something for the future. And it is a change because it's going to mean that people live more densely and they're going to have to leave their cars behind. They're going to have to get on rail to go to work. So, you know, it's really going to be a wonderful thing for the future. You know, I would say there's not really a lot of place to develop in the Mililani area. I mean, Mililani Mauka has really nothing left except one specific
so
lot.
It has
but
been defined,
you know,
yes.
really, it's pretty much defined. So if Koa Ridge goes, you know, what we know is Mililani really doesn't have much space left.
What about the red fire ant issue? Do you think there needs to be more funding? Let's talk about those pesky creatures. Marilyn, let's start with you.
Yeah, it was nice that you asked that because actually both Beth and I have really been involved in it. And as a matter of fact, we were both walking the district one day with our little fire ant kits that we had, you know, so we said to each other, well, great minds think alike, but actually, they have started treatment in the area of Mililani where the little fire ants were discovered. And I read in the Mililani News today that actually within a year, they hope that the treatment will be effective. Also, as I said, I do this little show on Olelo, and I just interviewed Rob Curtis, who's with the Department of Agriculture, on the little fire ant issue, and he gave us a lot of information. And I think we can overcome it in our area, but the Big Island has really gone too far and won't be able to do this. So thanks to Beth and, you know, for all her little ant kits and for me going around with my ant kits and the program I did on Olelo, I think we're doing pretty well and getting it eliminated.
Your thoughts, Beth, on that?
Yeah, you know, we've been woefully inadequately funding invasive species in the past. I think 2013 was the first year we started to increase funding again for this. And thank God, because all that funding went to Mililani. A couple $100,000 at least have already been spent just addressing this situation. So I do think it's under control. What I remind people, and it's been, when I go door to door, I just remind people, make sure you keep checking your yard because it can be eradicated as long as we find it.
All right.
And there's another invasive species that they are monitoring, and that is the coconut rhinoceros beetle. And they've got some traps hanging up in Mililani. So people are becoming more aware of the problem of invasive species. But like Beth said, the Department of Agriculture can really use more help in monitoring this.
I'd like to give both of you a chance to ask each other a question. Beth, if I could start with you, what question would you ask Marilyn in terms of her approach to any issues or where you guys might differ?
Oh, how interesting. Oh, I bet we don't have time for me to sit and think either.
Is there a place, you obviously both have a lot of agreements. Is there a place where you feel you have disagreements and would approach issues differently?
I definitely think we have a lot of disagreements. I think we have sometimes completely different views on certain things. What would be my question? Do you have a question first, Marilyn? Maybe you have one off the top of your head.
I don't really have one that has been, you know, kind of sitting on top of my head, but, you know, you mentioned that we do have disagreements. And one thing that, you know, I've always been very active in the Women's Caucus at the legislature. And one of the really important issues that we dealt with over the last few years was helping the victims of rape. And you voted against helping the victims of rape by allowing the hospitals to give emergency contraception. And, you know, I wondered what made you do that, and how you could do that when you yourself are a woman, and I've heard you mention sometimes that you had known women who were raped.
Absolutely. And you know, that was another one of the very hard decisions. And to be completely honest, I went back to my office and cried after that vote. It was difficult, but what it came down to for me was that there was no compromise on the table. What the bill was forcing people to do was to provide care that some of our hospitals might disagree with. So any hospital that was built on a Catholic property was then in jeopardy of potentially closing down. And I was very worried that that was going to cause Queens West to have to shut down. And that's something that our community desperately needs. And there was no compromise on the table. We proposed compromises that would have allowed an exemption for religious freedom. Those were never discussed or taken up. And I understand that certain people have the ideology that there should be no religious exemption, but I really believe that we needed one, if for no other reason than to make sure those hospitals could stay open.
Well, now the hospital is open, and it looks like it will stay open.
Yes, you're right. But that wasn't clear at the time. Yeah.
Beth, any question you would like to, or we can also move on to another question. Do you have a question for Marilyn? Or?
I really don't.
Okay, we'll move on.
I'm so sorry.
We've got lots of questions from viewers. That's okay. From Earl via Twitter, 48 states have legalized gambling. So, Ms. Lee, should we not go with the majority as we did with same-sex marriage?
Gambling is something that I've had a consistent position on for 16 years I was in the legislature. I do not think we should have legalized gambling in Hawaii.
All right. Any thoughts on gambling? All right, agreed.
Agreed.
What do you think is the most effective way to lower housing costs across the state? And just a quick response on that. I know we've touched on housing development. You both are pro-development, to try to answer some of those questions. In terms of any sort of thoughts in terms of what other taxes you might be willing to raise, other than supporting rail? Is there any other instance in which you would support raising taxes? Any thoughts?
I personally think that we're overtaxed already. There are a lot of measures that I voted against because they were tax increases. At the end of the day, I don't think it's about taxes, it's about the cost of living. And any tax increase impacts our residents' already very high cost of living. And as I said, kids regularly say that's what their parents complain about. So I don't want to do anything that's going to jeopardize that.
Other than making an exception for the GET tax?
Potentially.
Potentially. Marilyn.
Well, having the long experience that I've had in the legislature, I know one can never say never, but I don't anticipate anything else coming up. But you know, we're looking at some questions about whether our revenue is sufficient. The Council on Revenues just had a report, I think at the beginning of June. So when you get into a very sticky situation, as we did back in the Cayetano administration, sometimes things need to be done that you don't want to do. So I would reserve my judgment. I won't say never, but I would very much not like to raise taxes.
All right. Thank you both for joining us this evening. A lot of good information. Coming up, we'll have the two candidates from Senate District 23, which runs along the Windward Coast and into the North Shore. Right now, please enjoy this message about Hiki No Festival 2014, which is showcasing the best in storytelling from Hawaii students.
They say, you're just a kid. To keep your head down and listen and learn what you're given, but you have a story.
Bullying isn't acceptable.
With people and places and feelings and faces, when all you have is a note, you have a story.
What culture do I live in?
In the late nights, the dark mornings, the minute you wake till the moment you nod, you have a story. It's waiting for that frame, that bite, that perfect line, that 1,000-word picture.
My family and I, we are considered homeless.
And it's there,
we're all human beings and we should all be treated equally.
You're a kid with a story. The world awaits. See the best in storytelling from Hawaii students. The Hikino Festival 2014. Visit pbshawaii.org to find Hikino Festival screenings in your community.
Hikino Festival 2014 is running now through September 4th. Go to pbshawaii.org for information on where and when Hikino Festival 2014 will be playing in your community. Now on to the second half of Insights on PBS Hawaii. Traffic, development, and preserving agricultural lands are among the big issues facing candidates for Senate District 23, which runs up the Windward Coast and into the North Shore. With us are the Democratic and Republican primary election winners who are seeking to fill the open seat created by Clayton Hee's unsuccessful bid for lieutenant governor. We encourage you to join the conversation by calling, emailing, or tweeting your questions and comments. Gil Riviere served from 2010 to 2012 as a Republican state representative in District 46 and was also appointed House Minority Whip. Now running as a Democrat, Riviere owns and operates a mortgage brokerage and is president of Keep the North Shore Country. Richard Fale is completing his first term as state representative for House District 47. He is also the director of the Polynesian Eyes Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to researching and preserving Polynesian culture. Welcome, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us both. Let's start with an issue that is constantly plaguing visitors and residents of the North Shore: traffic. Could I start by asking you, Gil, any thoughts in terms of what you would do to alleviate the traffic situation presently on the North Shore?
Okay, the traffic has been a concern for the last 10 years. It has been going on, especially in the area of Laniakea, and we have been working to find long-range solutions for that. So that's one area that needs attention. There were barriers put in by the Department of Transportation back in December, which have alleviated traffic in the short run. But the critical question is that really all that we're going to get? Are we done? Is that the solution? And I would say no, and I would actually argue that the traffic is again worsening on weekends. On Saturdays and Sundays, it gets back to where it was a couple years ago. Afternoons, it's backing up. So that mustn't be the final solution. We have to continue for the struggle in Laniakea. There are other issues around in Waikane. The stream often overflows. And I have proposed in the past, and I will proceed to follow up on it, having electronic messaging boards along the windward side to notify drivers that the road is closed ahead. So there's a lot of work to do on the infrastructure.
Before I ask Richard for his opinion on this, you mentioned there have to be other solutions. What other solutions? What are some of the things you would propose?
Well, in 2007, there was money allotted, budgeted for a study to look exactly what would be an appropriate solution. Should the road be wiggled? Should it be moved 100 feet in, 200 feet in? And an environmental assessment was meant to be done. The Department of Transportation did not pursue that. 2009, there was more money appropriated. So finally, in 2012, a study was begun, but it hasn't made much progress. And at this point, the Department of Transportation is not even budgeting money for any realignment project or any concern. So at this point, it looks like the DOT is throwing in the towel, and we can't allow that. I don't know if you've been out to the North Shore lately, but there's a big sign from the police that says, "Don't leave your valuables in the car." Since the barriers have gone up, the car break-ins has gone up astronomically. There's more visitors getting their cars broken into than previously, and so there's a lot of issues going on there.
That can't be good for tourism. Yeah. Richard, your thoughts?
Well, first of all, Malia, thank you for having us. Thank you to Suzanne for helping. Nick, thank you very much for your assistance, and thank you to Kathy for the makeup. And good to see you again, James. Well, the traffic issue is something that we've been intensely working on for the past couple of years. We've seen a significant amount of progress at zero additional cost to the Hawaii taxpayer. And this is actually through efforts to find out and actually understand what exactly is going on there. Up to date, we have appropriated up to $3 million just to study the issue. Prior to my election into office, we finally got the DOT to actually move on some actual solution items, and we've actually seen some significant improvement. The barriers that are currently placed there are definitely a temporary solution. And that just allows us to at least move forward with something. Because over the past 10 years, nothing has been done. So it's been great to actually see some progress being made, and we're continuing to analyze the situation and to gather data so that we can actually come up with the best alternative to the barriers that are currently there.
All right, let's switch to some questions from viewers. From Brian via email, do you support the development of agricultural lands at Gunstock Ranch for Envision Laie? May I start with you?
Yes, I support the development of the Envision Laie project, which also brings resolution to a number of longstanding issues out at the North Shore. The North Shore for too long is becoming a playground only for those wealthy enough to afford to be out there. And the families that have been born and raised out there, who have dead ancestors who are buried in the ground out there, can no longer afford to be there. We just saw records being broken here in the state of Hawaii, where the average home, the median price exceeded $700,000. And we've also seen that studies show that by 2020, the average cost of a home is going to be $1 million here in Hawaii, and that's just not acceptable. And we need to take action steps in the short term, midterm, and long term to help relieve these issues.
All right, let me ask you the same question, Gil. Do you support the development of agricultural lands at Gunstock Ranch for Envision Laie?
I do not support developing the ranch lands there. Those agricultural lands serve as ranching land. We need pasture land. We need grazing lands. Here's the question. Here's the issue. Really, is we need affordable housing. 20 years ago, there was a proposal to build 550 affordable housing units within Laie, near the university, within the town, keeping it a contiguous, walkable, livable town. So I do support that. I think that's where the housing should rightfully go. And as we go forward in the future, as we look for long-range solutions, what do we really want to see in our region? I don't think we should be just cavalierly developing over agricultural lands. We've got to find agricultural purposes for our agricultural lands, put the housing where it's appropriate in the town that exists now.
All right, a question from a viewer for you from Malia on the North Shore. Why did you change from Republican to Democrat?
Okay, that's a great question. I switched because I can do more for our district. I can be a better advocate by working with the majority party. I've always been effective at working with everybody in the room. When I was in the House of Representatives, I was one of the more effective representatives reaching across the aisle and working. So I have the ability to be nonpartisan, to work with everybody, and I will be more effective with the majority party.
All right, a question, Richard, for you from Moses in Nanakuli. Would you consider a constitutional amendment on the issue of same-sex marriage?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, this is an issue that that the people of Hawaii feel hurt and they feel deceived by their state legislature when we took this vote back in the late 1990s. I mean, this is something with an impact of this strength on our communities, on our families here in the state of Hawaii. This is something that we should have made a decision together on. And that's something that's very foundational and basic to who we are as people here in the state of Hawaii. We believe in collaboration. We believe in working together. And we don't believe you take somebody and ram something down their throat that they don't want. I mean, the division that was caused by Neil Abercrombie and the passage of SB 1 has severely damaged many relationships in the state of Hawaii, and that is just inconsistent with who we are as a people here.
Your thought on this issue?
You know, the special session that Mr. Fale is referring to was convened by the governor. So the legislature was called in to pass the vote. I'm not sure that that was the proper way to handle this subject. It should have been brought forward in a regular session for discussion. At this point, however, the law has been passed. I do not support overturning the law, so therefore I would not. I think we move forward and we treat everyone with respect and tolerance. And I think our senator for this district needs to work from that foundation that we have to bring everybody together, and we've got to stop dividing and throwing angry words out there.
All right, for Richard, you have supported Envision Laie, which will produce more lower income service jobs. What do you propose will produce higher income jobs? And that's from Kahuku.
Envision Laie producing low-income service jobs?
This is the question.
The central issue with Envision Laie is providing housing for families who are struggling out there. That area has the highest density of multi-generational families that live out there. And the core focus of Envision Laie is helping families and provide housing that is affordable for people out there. Service jobs is not what at the core of Envision Laie is about. It's about providing housing affordable housing that's desperately needed for families out there.
Any thoughts on the job issue in terms of creating more jobs for this area?
Oh yes, absolutely. And this is something that we have been working on and we're really excited about because this is critical to the future of Hawaii. We sit down with young people day after day talking about what exactly should the future of Hawaii look like, the kind of jobs that are necessary. The 10 highest paying jobs didn't even exist in 2004. That's how rapid the economy of the world is changing. That's how rapid the economy of the state of Hawaii is changing. And we need to be able to bring Hawaii into the 21st century and allow us to function in an economy that gives our kids the skill set to thrive in an economy built for the information age.
By doing what?
Hawaii is strategically located between the largest economy in the world, the mainland of the United States, and the fastest growing economies in the world in Asia, and also the number 2 and number 3 economies in China and Japan. This provides us with a great opportunity to find niches for our communities out here, because I tell the kids, look above your heads, and they all look at me, I tell them, what do you see? And they say nothing, and I say, I see trillions of dollars of economic activity going between the United States and Asia, and we need to be able to outfit ourselves with what's necessary when it comes to infrastructure and education to reach up and make sure that we can be part of a global economy and make sure that we thrive here.
Gil, your thoughts?
The question was, what are we going to do for economic activity within our district? We have, as an example, we have the Olelo Studios and the Kahuku Film Club. Those are jobs that pay well. People in the film and media industry have a great opportunity to make a living. It's low impact on the environment. We have the vast majority of agricultural lands that remain on Oahu. And so we've got to find and stimulate agricultural enterprises, because it's not just, people often say, well, man, working on a farm's hard work, I don't want to do that. Well, we have people that are growing food and we have people that are willing to work, but there's also other jobs that are related. There's the guy driving the trucks, the guys providing the packaging, there's the guys, the marketing guys selling. So I think people want very much to have more local food production, more sustainability, local food for local people. We've got the ag lands, we've got the creativity with the Wailua robotics, we've got the creativity with the Kahuku Film Studio. So we need regionally appropriate economic activity that enhances our lifestyle.
Would you break with your party's caucus over an issue you felt passionate about? Can you give any examples? Any thoughts on that, Gil?
My thoughts are, I'm for our district, so I would say that straight up. I've never been hyper partisan. I have gone against, when I was the Republican, I had gone against some of the issues regarding maybe there was a tax or a fee or something. And under the circumstances, when you analyzed and looked at all of the ramifications, the potholes on the highways, we were down to a point where the road repair fund was down to $20 million and sinking, and the department needs approximately $100 million to properly budget repairs. So I was willing to support fee increases on vehicle registrations, and that's something that traditionally wouldn't be done. Wasn't hyper confrontational, but it was an area where I went against some of the other guys in the caucus.
Richard.
This is something completely different that we've been able to achieve over the past couple of years, is that we've been able to develop a collaboration between members of the minority party and the majority party based on what is good policy and what is good for the state of Hawaii. So we've been able to introduce a new dynamic to what it means to govern well here in the state of Hawaii. And this is something that I think we consistently pursue. And these drawing these lines in the sand based on, well, my party says this and your party says that, is something that needs to go away as we look towards what is best, simply best for the future and the state of Hawaii. And we see the dysfunction that's going on in Washington, D.C. And, you know, this is what I often say. Let the mainland problem stay on the mainland. Let Hawaii be Hawaii, and let's do what's best for the people of Hawaii.
A question from Pete on the North Shore. Would either candidate support a constitutional amendment to vote on limiting property taxes? Why don't we start with you, Richard?
Property taxes is something especially our senior citizens struggle with on a daily basis. And this is something, I wouldn't say that we just go in and arbitrarily say, okay, we're going to limit property taxes to this, because then someone else could go in and say, well, we're going to raise it 100%. Property taxes need to be reassessed, and we need to deal with a lot of the dysfunction that currently exists within our system of government. And even though that is a city issue, there is good guidance and collaboration that can happen between the state and city as we work on revenue sources for the city that the state should be providing, so that we don't have to raise property taxes.
And in terms of a constitutional amendment?
I think it's premature to go down that road.
Gil, your thoughts?
One of the first things I ever voted on was Prop 13 in California. I grew up in California, and in 1978 there was a constitutional measure just to do that. There were people getting displaced out of their houses. They worked, they bought their house, they paid their house off, and they were living in quiet retirement. Meanwhile, property values were escalating all around them, driving them out of their house. These people had done everything right. They had their house, it was paid for, and now they could no longer afford to live there. So we don't have the same situation in Hawaii because our property taxes are relatively low when you look at a national standard. But I do understand the concern for protecting people. They should not be driven out of their houses because properties around them are selling at astronomical prices. Again, it's a city issue. It's something I would consider to put a cap on, to not drive people out, because that's the last thing we want to do is wipe out our retired people, our kupuna, who've worked so hard for their life.
From Mary in Punalu, question for Mr. Riviere. How instrumental were you in preserving Turtle Bay?
Thank you for the question. I have been involved with the Turtle Bay situation since 2006 when we formed Keep the North Shore Country. Through our lawsuit, we challenged the fact that the city was trying to let them get away with a 20-year-old environmental impact statement. We prevailed. We went to the Supreme Court of Hawaii and won. So that forced the supplemental environmental impact statement by Turtle Bay. Turtle Bay got new owners. They came in and they've been very good at engaging the public. They've been very good at trying to find a proper way forward, which was not there without our lawsuit. So the conservation effort that was recently realized, some would argue that it was directly attributable to the fact that the developers had to come in and engage the community. So I lobbied at the legislature as for the conservation, for the resolutions that enacted the conservation project, and I've been involved all the way. Thank you.
Richard, what's your support for that project?
Well, I couldn't disagree more with Gil on this. Those lawsuits made the relationship so toxic between the parties that were involved. It was such a difficult task to get people to sit back at the table and talk, because there were so many bad feelings there. What was able to happen was that we rejected the proposals that were first given last year, which would have taken $100 million and just gone in and condemned that land and taken it away. What we were able to finally achieve after we rejected that proposal was to come back with a collaborative effort between the state and Turtle Bay that Turtle Bay voluntarily entered into. And the fact that they tried to bring back some of the things that they did last year almost jeopardized the deal that we were able to achieve this year. So, running around, suing people, throwing lawsuits, that's not the way to get things done. And that's why I hope moving forward that we're able to do business in Hawaii a different way, other than suing each other and other than kind of ruining relationships between people.
May I add something? I just have to say this in light of what was just said. The Senator Hee from our district submitted a resolution to encourage a voluntary conservation project. It was a Senate resolution, concurrent resolution 164. It was encouraging the governor to create a working task force to engage in friendly voluntary conservation. Mr. Fale was the only legislator out of 76 to speak with severe concerns, and he spoke and voted with strong reservations. And now he pretends to say that, through his great work, he was able to really make it happen. Well, it's one or the other. He was never there for the project. So I would disagree with some of what he's just said.
Let me give you a chance to respond to that.
Yeah, let me respond to that. The original bill that they threw out there was SB 894 for $100 million to buy land to do nothing with it. That was something that was wrong fiscally for the community. It was wrong for Turtle Bay. It was wrong for the workers that were there. We said we need to come back with something that works for everybody, because we're not focused on serving one particular interest group. Remember, this is a very diverse community. There's lots of different groups of people that live and work in that area. So we said that SB 894 was not good and it was not right. When we finally went back to the table and worked on what finally came out was something that the House had to work on, because the Senate had blown it and what the governor was doing wasn't exactly working well. So we were able to save the Turtle Bay deal with 6 minutes left to the deadline, and that was the House bill that we were able to pass. And that had to do with a lot of heavy lifting that happened on the House side. So that's why I say it was due to the House's effort to bring those parties together to make that deal happen.
All right, and let's move on to, we have two viewers who have asked somewhat different questions for you. I'm going to actually read both. From Larry via email, as a leader of our community, who would you put first, God or the people of Hawaii? From Tony and Kahalu, if faced with voting on an issue where your religious beliefs and the views of your constituents were in conflict, how would you vote?
I don't see how things would be contrary to each other in those situations. Religious faith and those who practice Christianity like I do require of their followers to do what is right for the people that they serve. And that has been a consistent message throughout Christianity, is that your job of service is to serve your fellow man. And that means doing what's best for them. And I don't see any conflict between my faith as a Christian and my service to the community.
All right, Gil, we have a question or comment from Dylan via Cover It Live. Riviere changed parties, race, and his position on many issues. Why should we trust him? Your thoughts on that?
Everybody I've worked with knows the sincerity that I bring to the job. Whether it's down at the baseball field pulling weeds because the park needs some enhancement for the Little League that I've been involved with in coaching. People know that my sincerity is there. My heart is to represent this district. As a Democrat, as I mentioned previously, I can do more work for our district. I will be involved with the leading party. I am I am bipartisan in my nature, my temperament. I can bring everybody together. As far as switching races, that's a fair question. All of these are fair questions. I represented District 46 before the realignment, and District 46 included Waialua, Schofield Barracks, and up around through Laie. The new districts, District 47, goes around the Ko'olauloa down into Ko'olaupoko, and for the last 2 years I've been very active working in the community there and meeting people and understanding the issues. So it's a very natural situation that both districts make up the Senate district, so I'll be able to serve more people, I'll be more effective, and it was just a natural progression.
All right, let me give you both a chance to ask each other a question. Richard, is there a question that you would like to ask them?
Yeah, absolutely. Clayton Hee has represented this Senate district for a greater part of this past decade. And many people in our community feel like that he turned his back on them, that he ridiculed and mocked them during that special session, hasn't been responsive or hasn't listened to the will and desires of that district. I know you have a very close relationship with Clayton Hee. He was the first person to endorse you.
What's the question?
So the question is you endorsed Clayton Hee for the Senate seat, and how can the people in Senate District 23 expect anything else other than the same that's been going on there? Or in other words, like, would you just be Clayton Hee Part 2?
All right, your response, Gil.
Well, the answer is no, I am not Clayton Hee. He has his own political career, work he has done, and things that he has to stand on. As I've mentioned, I can work with everybody. I don't have enemies. I don't pick sides and throw spears at people. I work with what we've got. Senator Hee has many faults. He has many supporters, many opponents. He's been good for Kahuku Hospital. Okay, he saved Kahuku Hospital. He was good on Turtle Bay. He was a powerful legislator. I don't agree with him on issues, on every issue. I'm not Senator Hee. I'm Gil Riviere, and I bring myself to the game, and I believe that I do a good job.
Do you have a question to ask in response, or on?
Thank you. My question would be, you know, in looking forward for the long range, going forward in the future, you know, there's a saying that we have to look forward 7 generations in the future. What is your vision for Ko'olauloa, Ko'olaupoko, and Waialua? What's your vision for the North Shore 7 generations from now? What's it going to look like?
I really like that you actually use the term 7 generations,
Mm-hmm.
because the current situation is destroying the generations that have lived in Ko'olaupoko for more than 7 generations. We're talking hundreds of generations. And that's what needs to change, is that we have a situation where we find ourselves building bathrooms and putting cesspools over graveyards that have been there long before. And that's something that's got to stop. And I think given this primary election and what happened a couple of weeks ago, is that the people of Hawaii are crying out for change and for something different. And that's why I believe that they see that what I bring to the table in regards to economic reform, into government reform, into education reform, that we are actually looking on setting Hawaii on a course for the next 100 years that will best serve not only this generation, not only 7 generations, but hundreds of more generations to come in this great state.
All right, Richard, what's the first piece of legislation you would introduce if elected?
The first piece of legislation, I think, given what happened most recently, is that we severely need election reform. We have severely underfunded the Office of Elections, and now it is not clear what the undue influence the governor has over the Office of Elections. The governor came out and in a statement said that he had nothing to do with the calling of the elections that were suddenly put on Friday over the earlier statement that said that people would have 21 days to vote. And then the Office of Elections, Scott Nago, came out and said that they had informed the governor of what their decision was and that a directive had come down on how they should proceed. I mean, I think this is the integrity and trust and faith that people of Hawaii have in their government system, especially in our democratic government system. We must make sure that the voices of the people are heard and that we are accurately accounting for those votes.
Gil?
You know, it's a good question. It's a fair question. Everybody says, well, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do that. Well, we have to work as a body, right? So the entire Senate, 25 people have to vote on something. So there's a caucus package that's going to be put together. And so how do I fit in with that? Well, I'm going to work with the caucus. Some of the priorities that I want to bring would be stimulating agriculture. Okay, we have water coming out of Lake Wilson, which is not clean enough to grow fresh vegetables. There's a shortage of water for fresh foods on the North Shore. So that is an area that I'm going to continue to push. When I was in the House, I mentioned to Finance Chair Marcus Oshiro that we need to start looking at some phytoremediation or a project, and he took that initiative, and there was a bill that was passed in that area. We need to look at the infrastructure, again, the bridges, the highways. We've got to continue to fight for that. We need to focus on agricultural productivity in our district. We need to probably look at pesticide usage and make sure it's being regulated and overseen correctly too.
Where do you each stand on GMOs? Gil, let's start with you.
Yeah, I support labeling. People are very interested in what they have, what they're eating. I would encourage everybody. It's a very, very hot subject. It's one of those subjects where, oh, I read this, or I heard this, or I've seen this. I would encourage everyone to do the research on themselves. Find it, follow the footnotes, go independent research, and be skeptical on the claims from both sides. Don't just take somebody's word on it. Get out there and learn and research it. And I think that's what has to happen, is the awareness needs to be raised. And so, yeah, there you go.
Richard?
Well, I voted for the labeling bill that moved forward through the House and died in the Senate. When it comes to the issue of GMOs, and the counties really jumped the gun, and these, what happened with over in Kauai and the lawsuit that ensued, and now we have the federal government stepping in with the judge and his ruling. We need to make sure that the counties are not dealing with areas that they're not subject matter experts in. The state is the subject matter expert when it comes to agriculture. None of the counties have the knowledge and strength in the agriculture area that the state does. And that's actually one of my strong areas, being born and raised a farmer. This is something
Okay, really quick, I want to give you both a chance to end the show with, in 2 words, 3 words, what are the most important issues facing this district?
Facing this district,
really quickly.
The integrity of government and making sure that our leaders represent the people that they're sent there to represent.
Gil?
Land use and viability for our children going forward.
All right, thank you both for joining us tonight. A lot of good information. Next time on Insights, we'll continue our election 2014 coverage with 2 House races in State House District 20, including St. Louis Heights, Wilhelmina Rise, Manalani Heights, Kaimuki, and Palolo. Democratic Speaker Emeritus Calvin Say is fending off 2 challengers, the Green Party's Keiko Bonk and Republican Julia Allen. And in State House District 45, incumbent Republican Representative Lauren Matsumoto is facing a challenge from former Democratic Representative Michael Magoai, who previously served in the House from 2001 to 2011. Next time on Insights, we'll hear from these candidates about their qualifications and the issues in their communities. That's next time on Insights on PBS Hawaii. I'm Malia Mattoch. A hui hou.
Thanks, Malia.